to the President to the American Newspaper Publishers Association, Waldorf Astoria Hotel, New York City, April 27, 1961.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate very much your generous invitation to be here tonight. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
Understanding words is what you really need to start doing. You need to start doing your homework and understanding words. If you put an S in front of words, it becomes swords. And that's what words are. They're cutting. They can cause you great trouble. Humans are word-controlled creatures. So we need to establish what words mean. Again, when we talk about law, there's a Roman maximum in law that says, "For he that would be deceived, let him." Simply meaning, if you are so ignorant as to be deceived, then that's your business. That's your problem. So you need to do your homework and find out what words mean, especially in relation to law and government. Because there is a world of occultism that is operating today throughout the world, in which you use certain words, and when those words are used in a court, they don't mean the same thing at all.
Young, old, all sorts. I mean, from across the entire community spectrum. Why are we all here? I think we're all here because we know on a fundamental level in our hearts that we have a right to peace and abundance, and we aren't getting this. It's like there's a big stink in the room, everyone can smell it, everyone's going, "Oh my God, who cut that one?" And there's a group of lawyers in the corner with nose plugs on saying, "Smells like roses to me." We know there's a big stink in the room. We know that they use words they will claim are our laws that have the force of law over us, and yet at the same time they will claim that we cannot possibly understand these words because we are not a lawyer. There's a guy by the name of David E. Sherman. He's one of the premier tax accountants, and if you look in Snafu and Google David E. Sherman, he's on the record as stating these detaxers think they know what they're talking about. They read something that looks like English, but it's not. It's law, and they can't understand it. I called them on that. I said, if they can't understand it, how is it constitutional to use this to create liability on them? Never heard back from them.
How did the American people lose the original constitutional republic?
Well, first of all, everybody thought we still had the same system of government that we always had, because they did the change so slowly and gradually.
From Vermont is recognized.
Mr. President, there is a war going on in this country, and I'm not referring to the war in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan. I'm talking about a war being waged by some of the wealthiest and most powerful people in this country against the working families of the United States of America, against the disappearing and shrinking middle class of our country. The reality is that many of the nation's billionaires are on the warpath. They want more, more, more. Their greed has no end, and apparently there is very little concern for our country or for the people of this country if it gets in the way of the accumulation of more and more wealth and more power.
As Agenda 21 became more and more apparent to me, I began using the line in Parliament that government
the third pyramid, and now we see the truth that the Nile Delta, as you see here, superimposed on the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, shows us the Nile Delta. This is unbelievable because when you zoom in, Cairo is where it ought to be. Cairo, Illinois, Memphis, Tennessee is where it ought to be. And right above Cairo, you see Markanda, which is where the two eclipses will cross at the center of the Nile Delta. The Star of Egypt. You can't make this up. You can't stretch this. There you see the Ohio rivers and Mississippi River forming the boundaries of the Delta, almost perfectly superimposed. This is unbelievable. This is why they chose America. Study this map in more detail as it overlays the United States and find other cities that match up with the Nile Delta. I can almost bet you this video will be censored. It will be shut down. It will be defunded because they don't want you to know the truth about this.
Giants in the land, and now we're having Hollywood just come out with movie after movie after movie trying to denigrate biblical Moses, it doesn't matter if it's Noah, trying to distort true history so they can insert their own history. For instance, in the movie Noah, this is pretty fascinating. Most people don't know this. The fallen angels are the good guys and Noah's the bad guy.
No, they're called the Watchers, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They're called the Watchers. So
Another key temple site that I've investigated is Abydos, which is called the Gate to the Underworld. This is the Shrine of Osiris. Abydos, which looks like a modern corporate facility, is located where it is because of a former temple that once existed behind it called the Osirion. Researchers such as John Anthony West have examined the incredible 100-ton red granite blocks that we see here at the Osirion, and I have my picture here to reference the incredible size of these blocks. They've concluded that this is an example of a pre-flood temple.
What's interesting is that there was a huge satanic ritual that was performed on the very spot where Area 51 happened by this Jack Parsons, and in which they had this magical ceremony called Babylon Working, and it was designed by Aleister Crowley, who is a Satanist who called himself the B666.
Yes.
And the purpose of this series of magical ceremonies, which was performed on the spot of Area 51, where it's now located, was to unseal an interdimensional gateway, they said. And so this, they hoped, would allow other entities known as the, quote, old ones, access to our space-time continuum. And this witness said that he saw Jack Parsons rip a hole in space-time there, and he said that something evil flew in. And one other interesting point is that Aleister Crowley, who was a Satanist, who called himself the B666, as I just mentioned, he claimed to have contact with some kind of alien named Lamb. And this Lamb, he drew a picture of this alien that he was in contact, receiving messages from this being. And the picture that he drew of this alien, it's a striking resemblance to the common gray ET drawing.
Because you have to be perfectly aware that we're asking you to do this. See, they just can't trick you. You get me? They just can't trick you and say, well, he don't know he's serving the devil, because the Lord won't honor it.
On June 29, 2008, an author by the name of Brandon Levon began posting on a site called Above Top Secret. Random things began to happen to him, such as his car getting towed off and searched, his computer stolen while he was gone, and after the release of his second book, his house was seized by the city and demolished. Many of his threads were removed from the site, and the last two posts were titled Info Warnings and Brandon Levon is no more. And what he has discovered is there is a pattern behind almost all religions around the world, no matter how far back you go, and they are based on the zodiac calendar. Each cycle of the earth is 26,000 years. These are then separated into 4 periods of 6,500 and are considered worlds by all ancient people. And each of these worlds has a creator, savior, and destroyer. The first stage of the first world was the goat, the creator, then the archer, the savior, and the scorpion, the destroyer. It then starts again at the scale, creator, virgin, savior, then lion, destroyer. Please understand, this video is only a small fraction of the evidence these books contain. Let's begin. Kronos had 3 sons, Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus. And according to Plato's dialogues, each was allotted 1/3 of the earth. In the exact center of all the land masses of the world was put the marker that represented their rule over what would become the 3 races.
In 1877, author and theologian Joseph Seiss demonstrated that the Great Pyramid resides at the intersection of the longest line of latitude and the longest line of longitude, the exact center of all the landmass in the world.
This bloodline kept its status as gods by the knowing about or causing of a global catastrophe.
Power was not given. It had to be taken. Vowing revenge, she made a choice to embrace evil. Set, the god of death. They made a pact. A pact that would unleash darkness itself.
Do the many strange carvings found at Copan really provide proof of contact between the Maya and otherworldly beings? And if so, might that contact have produced offspring that could also be traced to an extraterrestrial source? On the west side of the main temple at Copan stands a 63-step structure known as the Hieroglyphic Stairway. It contains more than 1,200 stones, carved with symbols that record the history of the kings of Copan.
This hieroglyphic stairway is the longest Mayan inscription in the world. It emphasizes the divine right of the 16 rulers of the Copan dynasty to rule their subjects, a power given to them by the gods.
A Hebrew professor from the University of Johns Hopkins University. He found that 8 out of 10 Palestinians have the true Hebrew bloodline. 2 out of 10 do not. Those Palestinians are the real Jews. He found out 8 out of 10 in Israel do not have Hebrew blood in them. They invaded Israel in 1947, slaughtered 40,000 true Hebrews, and took the place over. Their flag flies the satanic emblem on it. Now, why is that?
So another interesting part of this, again, is the ancient astronomy. A lot of these megalithic sites, are aligned to astronomical precision points. So when we look at some of these cultures, the Egyptians and the Sumerians, and dive into this knowledge, the 12 houses of the zodiac, where does this information come from, and what does it actually mean? What was it being used for? What's the significance of this? One thing I would state is the Sumerians, as we'll talk about here, being the first civilized culture to show up, were the ones who actually were the first ones to denote 12 parts of the heavens and divide them into zodiacs. And the way this works is very simple. Just like you would hear, we're in the age of Aquarius or in the age of Pisces. The way that would work was simply that right at the time of heliochal rising, which is when you go out early in the morning and the sun is just about to pop up over the horizon and it hasn't yet, and you can still see the stars against the backdrop of the sky. Well, what happens is when the sun starts to rise, if you can see, for instance, the constellation of Aquarius, whatever constellation the sun is rising in front of, you say, oh, we're in the age of Aquarius, we're in the age of Pisces. So it's a very interesting division of the heavens into 12 parts, but this knowledge is shown to have been held by high priests and courts from cultures, not just the Greeks and the Romans or the Egyptians, but it goes way all the way back into the Sumerians, as I'll show, having the first invention of this knowledge. But some of these cultures show knowledge of astronomy that it boggles, and it really is hard to put into perspective. The Egyptians, for instance, have not only a view of the 12 houses of the zodiac, or a divisional breakdown of the heavens, but they also took a much farther back view and had artifacts and replica elements that actually showed our position within the universe, where it wasn't just our solar system or our galaxy. It was a whole breakdown view, much larger out, which would show various other points in the universe. And these were inscribed on tablets and stones, where archaeologists have now broken down and visually found representations of the zodiac signs, but in a much more narrowed down view, where the view is in a much more expanded view of what they're explaining, and they've only identified the symbols that we know of in our zodiac, but it's a much more larger view that encompasses an astronomical layout that boggles modern archaeologists, and they really aren't able to accept a lot of the things that are presented, which we'll get into. So these artifacts still on display, and again, the archaeological community will accept zodiacal symbols, but the large view of how they could have known the position in the universe or in our solar system really just kind of boggles modern science. So you can see various points of reference for these diagrams and the clarity of what they're showing. This is one zodiacal set, just like it would be changing in a calendar. So again, the division of the heavens into 12 parts, a very interesting number, 12. Why 12? Where does this information come from? And as we'll see, the number 12 is a very pivotal number of information stemming from the Sumerian culture. Now, this is a Sumerian tablet that's roughly 4,500 years old, and you can see that it has symbols representing like the scorpion, and you can see the turtle there and various other symbols that are known to be astronomical symbols. The turtle isn't one, but various astronomical data coming out of the Sumerian culture, where this was the earliest known sources of this information. So another interesting
From top again. Say from top. From top. Amen. In the northern
northern hemisphere during late December, the days are at their shortest lengths and the nights are at their longest. For those of the pagan world, this has always been the greatest time of the year to celebrate and practice the works of darkness. The pagan calendar identifies this period as the winter solstice. It was during the pre-Christian midwinter pagan celebrations of Scandinavia's Norsemen where today's Christmas traditions began. As a means of honoring the pagan sex and fertility god Yule, a 12-day celebration during the month of December was inaugurated. A large single log considered to be a phallic idol was lit on fire and kept burning for 12 days. Animal or human sacrifices were offered in the fire on each of those days. Wild, delirious reveling accompanied the daily sacrifices as drunken participants defiantly strove to make contact with spirits. 1,000 miles away in pre-Christian Rome, celebrants were paying homage to their own gods during the winter solstice. Witchcraft traditions hold that a number of pagan gods were given birth during this period, including Dionysus, Attis, and Baal, chief male god of fertility and licentiousness. Another pagan god from Persia, identified as Mithra, was said to have been born specifically on December 25th. Mithra was the god of the unconquerable sun, the god of the light between heaven and earth, worshipped at that time by an influential Roman cult. His birth symbolized an end to the long nights and a return to the dominance of the sun. During the month-long winter solstice celebration, courts in Rome were closed. Any and all crimes were allowed. Homosexuality, cross-dressing, and uncontrolled debauchery reigned supreme. Rome's order was turned upside down. Even children were allowed to join in the drunken orgies as part of the Juvenalia celebration. By 270 AD, the Roman Emperor Aurelian had made it official, setting aside a 7-day period from December the 17th through the 24th, culminating in an exchange of gifts on December the 25th to celebrate the birth of the sun god. This Roman orgy to end all orgies later became known as Saturnalia, in honor of the god Saturn, the god of excess. Roman soldiers invading Britain brought with them their pagan orgiastic traditions. Upon taking root in England, Saturnalia became known as the Festival of Fools, reigned over by the Lord of Misrule.
As what was happening in America. So David started Can-Am Missing, a group of retired police officers, search and rescue experts, and other professionals who are trying to get a grip on how and why thousands, not hundreds, thousands of people have gone missing, most never to be seen again.
Almost, right? Even the toilet looks like antique. I know.
Still has power and everything. Oh my god. It's from 2016?
Dude, there's like multiple, like this bathroom.
Just turned the power on so we could see.
Dude, there's still like mouthwash, like.
Dude, I think these people were just foreclosed on. You know, they just kind of got kicked right out. It's crazy, man. Mirror. Wow. Just turned on the liquor cabinet, dude. Was that a Chick-fil-A?
With the dailies?
What the hell? No, oh
It was
my
like
God.
minis.
Dude, someone's liquor
Dude,
cabinet.
look at that. That's like solidified. That's like not even alcohol.
the good life. They're treated very well. And then they join. They decide, okay, I'm going to join. I'm going to join with you guys. And you start moving through the levels and you realize, hey, wait a minute, this isn't what I signed up for. Because then you start learning the ghastly truth of Satanism. And then when you get in, it's rituals, eating babies' hearts, sacrificing babies, drinking blood, being forced to have, if you're married, adulterous relationships because all of them are forced into adultery. Satan doesn't honor a marriage. You're married to him. Satanists have their own services that mock Christian services. They have them almost every weekend. They have them in underground churches across America. And they do everything opposite and against what a real church would do. Why would you want to join a group of people that think eating feces and drinking urine is fun? It's not optional. You have to do it. They all do it. And they don't complain. They get beyond that stage. They don't complain. They do it. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, what do? You go to an underground Hollywood club, a super secret Satanist club. Do they serve feces on toothpicks? These people are nasty. And you can tell it's the sheer demonism, demonic beings that control them, that make them do it. I mean, what human could eat feces and not just puke? Eating feces is huge with some. Huge. Anything abominable is high ranking with Satan. Anything that we would think is totally inhuman, abominable, then that's what you must do in Satan's realm. These groups are huge. There could be 100, 200 people at a gathering. They meet on estates, in people's mansions, often on a Friday or Saturday night, so it looks like the person's having a party, maybe. They meet in churches on Saturdays, underneath Catholic churches, for rituals. They have these rituals where they bring in animals. And this weekend, pretty much all the groups had donkeys. And they force all the members to have sexual relations, bestiality with the donkey. Okay, you've been on my nerves for 2 months, you get the cat. And you've been on my nerves for a month, you get the dog. And you, the highest ranking of us all, you get the donkey. She chooses who gets what. And she forces them to be sodomized. They all do this, not just her. They force them to be sodomized by donkeys. They force them to perform fellatio on donkeys. And nobody gets away with it just because you're the president of the United States who goes to the Chicago ones where Penny Pritzker is in charge. Just because you're the president doesn't mean you get out. It means you have to give more. Because you've got the highest rank in the land. More abominable things are expected of you. It goes on. One of the biggest things you give up is any kind of humanity. It's nothing but about humiliation and degradation. You want more, you have to give more. You have to give up everything about what makes you human. And they all don't sit around in their black robes. That's so Hollywood. Because in all these rituals, a big part of them is the orgies that take place. They all take their clothes off. They're all doing drugs.
The fact that Prince Barnhart, when he was a member of the SS, had been part and had also been a officer in the IG Farbid Combine, and that there was a department or a section known as the Farbin Builder.
We weten dat dit geen Walt Disney verhaaltje is. Het is helaas zo dat wereldwijd, en dit is niet alleen van deze tijd, dit is al van duizenden jaren. Ik heb ook ooit nog een stuk theologie gestudeerd. Zelfs in de Bijbel kom je het tegen bij de Israëlieten. Een van de redenen waarom de eerste 10 stammen toen uit hun land werden gezet en verbannen werden naar Babylonië, was juist vanwege de rituelen met kinderen. Inclusief het offeren van kinderen. Dus dit is een lijn. Vanuit al die shit ben ik ook gaan geloven. Omdat ik besefte dat er meer was dan alleen maar hemel en aarde. Er is werkelijk een onzichtbare wereld. Je praat werkelijk over een duistere macht. En je praat ook over een lichtmanifestatie.
Initially, we started off thinking that this is just a Canadian and a United States issue. And as the publicity went out, people started to contact me and says, hey, we have this case here, we have this case there. And son of a gun, they're like cookie cutters of all the same case. That's how closely they are assembled. So it wasn't a big stretch to realize that the top 4 countries, United States, Canada, UK, and Australia. Why? I don't know. But those are the top 4. They did find his backpack in extremely rugged and hazardous terrain on that mountain. And you can see it's all granite. And one of the things about Yosemite, it's almost all granite. And I think that's pretty odd that those other locations I showed you, all granite. Now it's all granite here. And they have the most disappearances in the world. You can kind of see that I'm setting the pace for you, for your country, about what's happening, little people disappearing, big people disappearing, both ages of that spectrum. It stays consistent. Justin O'Malley, 3 years old from Brisbane, missing 6/15/75, 2:30, Girraween Steep Park, border of Queensland, NSW, wearing a red jumper. 150 searchers, 40 soldiers, missing in an area of granite. That's where he disappeared. Does that look at all like Colorado, where those people were disappearing? Yeah, it does, doesn't it? In fact, when I first looked up this park, I almost fell out of my stool about how close that was to what we're dealing with in Colorado.
Today, Queen Elizabeth II is the head of state of the great nation of the Hebrew covenant called Great Britain. Her genealogy chart, according to the College of Heralds in London, traces her blue bloodline back to Abraham, who many modern scholars believe to be the Egyptian pharaoh, Amenemhet I. By connecting 22 dots, the true Hebrew and royal Egyptian identity of Queen Elizabeth II comes into focus. Number 1. What is the stone of Jacob, a Hebrew patriarch, doing beneath the Queen's throne chair? Number 2. Why was the Queen crowned at her coronation ceremony on top of a symbolic Egyptian step pyramid? Number 3. The monarch's crown has 12 stones at the base, each representing the 12 Hebrew tribes. The 12 stones of the 12 tribes were also worn on the breastplate of Hebrew high priests in Canaan. Number 4. The Union Jack represents the reunion of the United Kingdom of the 12 tribes of Jacob, or Jacob. The Union Jack is red, white, and blue, the same colors as the 3 crowns of Egypt. Number 5. The royal scepter originates in ancient Egypt and was carried by the Egyptian god Amun and by Egyptian pharaohs, who called themselves the Son of God. The royal scepter is now carried by pharaonic descendant Queen Elizabeth II. Her scepter contains the world's largest cut diamond, called the Star of Africa. Number 6. The Queen's punishing flail or whip is partially hidden under her arm. The flail or whip also originates with the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. Number 7. The symbol of the bee can be found within the Queen's royal wardrobe. In ancient Egypt, bees were the symbol of Egyptian royalty as well as the symbol of Egypt. Number 8. The symbols on the British coat of arms reveal Britain's Hebrew origin. According to the Bible, the harp symbolizes the Hebrew King David. The biblical lion and unicorn holding up the shield symbolize the nation of Israel. The motto, Dieu et mon droit, means God and my right, indicating the divine right of the British monarch to an eternal throne. Number 9. The headdress worn by judges and the Queen's high-ranking officials originate in ancient Egypt. Number 10. Kilts, like the one worn by Prince Charles, originate with the Egyptian pharaohs who wore white kilts. Number 11. The hymn, Zadok the Priest, written by Handel, was performed at the Queen's coronation in 1952. Zadok the Priest was the biblical priest who anointed the Hebrew King Solomon while the people cried, "God save King Solomon! Long live King Solomon! May the king live forever!"
God save Queen Elizabeth. Long live Queen Elizabeth. May the Queen live forever.
Number 12. During the coronation ceremony, the Queen turns to face the 4 corners of the globe. The orb carried by the Queen represents the globe over which the monarch rules. Number 13. The monarch's coronation gifts of a rod, bracelets, and a ring are a reenactment of the Bible story of the Hebrews, Judah, and Tamar. Number 14. Royal jubilees originate in ancient Egypt. Egyptian pharaohs celebrated their jubilees after 30 years of rule. In pharaonic tradition, the Queen has celebrated both silver and golden jubilees.
painting is of George Washington laying the cornerstone to our Capitol. This is significant because he's wearing his full Masonic ritual regalia. He's got a square and compass.
And then, as I walked into the main temple of this Scottish Rite building in Washington, D.C., right there before me was the black cube of Saturn, the Roman god of time worship.
And the Hebrew writing in the middle says, God said, let there be light, and there was light.
One of the driving forces behind this movement, the Illuminati, is the satanic cult movement in this country today. So I began my little journey forward. And one of the matters that I developed information about was an individual I learned about was Aleister Crowley. He likes to have his name pronounced Crowley to rhyme with holy. And the Satanists today, and for the number of years in the past, have basically used his philosophy and his writings as a guide.
He had so many Masonic degrees that you could fill up 5 pages of a book with them. This guy was probably the most highly honored Mason in the world. He styled himself the wickedest man in the world. He believed himself to be the great beast. And he changed his name to Aleister Crowley, so it would add up in both English, Hebrew, and Greek Kabbalah as 666. In 1904, Crowley had a communication with an extraterrestrial being named Iwas. And this being, through his wife, kind of a channeling type operation, brought forth a book that was called the Book of the Law in 1904. And this book declared that the slain and risen God, i.e. Jesus, had stepped off the throne, and that a new God, the crowned and conquering child, was taking his place. As a result of this, Crowley proclaimed the end of Christianity and the start of Crowleyanity. Crowley taught that the way you could live forever was by vampirizing little children sexually. And he personally bragged of having slaughtered 150 male children in 1 year. This is why he was called the wickedest man in the world.
And now listen to this sentence, folks, closely. For the highest spiritual working, one must accordingly choose that victim which contains the greatest and purest force. A male child of perfect innocence and high intelligence is the most satisfactory and suitable system. We're talking about human sacrifices.
And they'd also drug them up, and they'd take a sacrificial knife and they'd start from the chest and move all the way down to your abdomen. And then that's how they sacrificed, and they'd collect the blood and they'd drink it. When the mid-September through mid-November, they sacrifice babies and nothing but babies because they need the pure blood of the untainted children. And I didn't understand what it was like. I can't believe I'm seeing this every year of my life. I've experienced that, and that was the hardest part for me. It's like hearing those babies literally scream and cry, and then seeing their blood flow.
The little boy was taken to a basement. He was crucified alive. First he was skinned.
Why is it that no one knows this? Because there's Satanists in the police force and also in the government, the army. They're everywhere. They're even on the council of Yeah, the representatives of the United States also. And they're silenced because this is not being exposed because they don't want it to be exposed. Because they're really good at lying and hiding things.
Rebecca, what happens to the people that want to come out of Satanism?
They get killed. They get followed, they get taken, they get sacrificed in front of the congregation of the Satanic Church.
Why?
Because they know too much information about the Satanists and who their names and places of where they keep the people underground, and they just know too much information. There's no, it's like being in a gang or in a mafia. You don't get out alive without consequences.
Okay.
Yes. Now my name is Annemarie van Blijenburg. I have been married for 24 years met Kees van Kortlaar. Kees van Kortlaar, together with his 3 brothers, form a criminal organization known as the Octopus Syndicate. They work from 1960 on till the day of today. In order of Queen Beatrix, they have organized martel, torture, rape and killing of children in a public setting. They organized that through youth detention centers in the Netherlands. The youth detention centers were told that the criminals were asking for the Dutch court for children who could work with the Dutch Queen for a certain period. The detention centers were very happy. They thought that Queen Beatrix was a very social woman, and they gladly volunteered in giving files of certain children to the criminals. When they wanted to verify what the criminals told them, they were given a name and a phone number of a high-ranking officer at the court of Queen Beatrix, and that high-ranking officer would state and tell them that indeed those criminals were seeking children to work for a certain period at the Dutch court.
Elijah Wood, the star of the Lord of the Rings series, is making headlines around the world, risking his career and his life, admitting that an organized pedophile mafia runs Hollywood and is protected by industry elites.
I'm going to read the names I was given, and these are people, folks, that we see every day, and you never realized, ew, behind closed doors, he's a worshiping Satan freak. He's eating poop and having sex with animals and demons. And they all have herpes, folks. Almost all of them have herpes. It's a given when you're a Satanist. So this weekend involved with donkey rituals, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Rabbi Shmuley, however you say his name, the co-founders of Google, the guy who started Beanie Babies, Derrick Rose, co-owner of Chicago Bulls, or the owner of Chicago Bulls, Mike Quigley, congressman, Senator Dick Durbin and Mark Kirk, William Wrigley, the Wrigley billionaire, Emmanuel Rahm and his wife and brother, Kanye West, Sam Zell, owner of the Cubs, owners of the Blackhawks, the co-founder of Groupon, Valerie Jarrett, NBC News anchors Allison Rosati, ABC's Ron Majors, NBC's Brian Williams, Wyatt Rockefeller, and then you have Hillary and George Soros. You know, you look at these people and you wonder, don't they want out once they get in? How do they get past the feces crap? And